Brothers and sisters, please welcome John Shirey, President of IAFF Local 2117.
Good morning, brothers and sisters. My name is Jonathan Shirey. I'm the President of Local 2117, Reedy Creek Professional Firefighters. On behalf of my entire executive board, nearly 200 union members, I want to welcome you guys to Orlando, Florida for the 2022 IAFF ALTS HRC Conference. It is an honor to be standing up here in front of the best and brightest labor leaders across North America. I became a firefighter out of my desire to serve my community. As my time on the job and my passion grew, I quickly realized that the most important community to me was my firefighter one. I went on to serve first as vice president of our local and now president. My story is not a special one. It is one of probably thousands of examples just like that all across our great IAFF. And as such, it is important to remember that none of us possess the strength, the power, or the endurance to achieve alone what we can when we stick together through this great union. I wanted to share a quick story about my experiences with the IAFF. Like many locals across the US and Canada, we have been faced with a ton of challenges due to the COVID-19 pandemic. We have been under relentless attack by our local government for the past 2 years, and to spare you guys all the boring details, let's just say we've been in the trenches. We finally kind of hit a point where we weren't really sure how to move forward, so we decided to reach out to the IAFF for guidance. My first call was to a longtime friend of our local, DVP Walt Dix. Shortly after discussing our issues with Walt, I got a call from our general president, Ed Kelly. He told me that the IAFF has our backs and that he would be closely paying attention to our situation as things progressed. Ed also agreed to speak to some of the local media and help spread the word about the issues that we're facing. And most importantly, the general president is going to be meeting with us with the Reedy Creek District Administrator tomorrow to help try to resolve some of the issues that we've been dealing with. As a local with only 200 members, I never would have imagined the overwhelming amount of support that we've received from the IAFF, and I would be remiss if I didn't thank the entire IAFF staff, DVP Dix, and the General President, Ed Kelly. On one of the last phone calls that I received from the General President and Walt, I was thanking them for all of the help that they've given to our local, and I told them that I never would have thought that Edzo would have been so personally involved in our small locals fight. What Edzo said in reply, I'll probably never forget. He said, it's my job to help, and I don't count the number of members in a local before deciding to get involved. He said that if it's the right thing to do, this IAFF will have your back. Brothers and sisters, I hope you enjoy this year's conference. If you need any assistance while you are here, please don't hesitate to ask myself or any of the local 2117 members that you may encounter all across property. And now it is a great pleasure of mine to be able to announce my friend and mentor to the stage for today's invocation. Rick Spence recently retired after 30 years at Reedy Creek Fire Department. He served 17 years as a union officer and has served for the past 5 as our chaplain. Rick has also served, still serves as a sergeant-at-arms and chaplain for the Florida Professional Firefighters. He has also served as sergeant-at-arms for the IAFF and was named the 2019 Florida Professional Firefighter of the Year. Please help me in welcoming Chaplain Rick Spence.
Thank you very much for allowing me to be here. I know what an honor it is to stand up here. Let us pray. Most gracious Heavenly Father, we come to you right now with grateful and humble hearts, Lord. We're so thankful to be able to meet here in person to renew relationships and acquaintances that we've not been able to see for so many years. We're thankful for the men and women that have worked so hard to put this convention on. We thank you for their work and just pray for your blessings upon them. We're thankful for the men and women that are here, that have come here to make themselves better, to go back to their departments, to make their departments better, to make their communities better. Just thank you that they've taken the time away from their family and the job to be here. We just pray you'll be with the men and women who are on the job today. Watch over them, protect them, give them wisdom, discernment as they go about their task. And lastly, we want to pray for the men and women in our armed services who are out there protecting this country to keep us free. We thank you for their service, their commitment, their sacrifice. In Jesus' name, amen.
Please stand for the presentation of colors, led by the Reedy Creek Fire Department and Orange County Fire Rescue. And please remain standing for the anthems of our two great nations, performed by Oscar Negron.
Good morning. It is customary in the United States to honor our guests that we perform their national anthem first. We will do that, followed by the Star Spangled Banner. Please remain standing. Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight. O'er the ramparts we watched, were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Please be seated. Please be. Brothers and sisters of the IAFF and honored guests, the District Vice Presidents and Trustees of the International Association of Firefighters. The First District Vice President, James Slevin, representing New York and New Jersey. The Second District Vice President, Mark Woolbright, representing Missouri, Nebraska, Iowa, and Kansas. The Third District Vice President, Jay Colbert, representing Massachusetts, Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, Connecticut, and Rhode Island. The Fourth District Vice President, Andrew Pantelis, representing Maryland, the District of Columbia, Virginia, Delaware, West Virginia, and Pennsylvania. The Fifth District Vice President, Thomas Thornburg, representing Minnesota, Wisconsin, North Dakota, and South Dakota. The Sixth District Vice President, J. Michael Carter, representing Alberta, British Columbia, Saskatchewan, Yukon, and the Northwest Territory. The Seventh District Vice President, Ricky J. Walsh, representing Washington, Montana, Idaho, and Alaska. The 8th District Vice President, Mark Sanders, representing Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Kentucky, and Michigan. The 9th District Vice President, Michael Frenier, representing Colorado, Oregon, Utah, Wyoming, and Nevada. The 10th District Vice President, Stephen Gilman, representing Arizona, California, New Mexico, Hawaii, and Guam. The 11th District Vice President, Roy L. Sandy McGee, representing Oklahoma, Texas, and the Canal Zone. The 12th District Vice President, Walter J. Dix, representing Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, and the Caribbean area. The 13th District Vice President, Fred LeBlanc, representing Ontario and Manitoba. The 14th District Vice President, Danny Todd, representing Tennessee, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. The 15th District Vice President, David Burry, representing Newfoundland, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, and Quebec. The 16th District Vice President, James B. Johnson, representing all federal firefighters of the United States and Canada. The Region 1 Trustee, Alex Forrest, representing Canada. The Region 2 Trustee, Mark S. Willett, representing the Eastern United States, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. And the Region 3 Trustee, Tony Mejia, representing the Western United States, the Canal Zone, and Guam. Brothers and sisters, the IAFF District Vice Presidents and Trustees. Brothers and sisters, your IAFF General President, Edward A. Kelly. We were never above you, never below you, always by your side. You got the warrior's might and the heart of a lion. We were never above, never below. We were never above you, never below you, always by your side. You got the warrior's might and the heart of a lion. We were never above, never below, never above, never below.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Florida. It's been almost 2 years since our IAFF family's been together. You know, it feels good to be together. We need each other. We need each other as firefighters, and we sure need each other as union leaders. We always have, and we're always gonna. Next month, it'll be 104 years that this IAFF has been relying on each other to carry our cross, to leave it better than we found it. And I'm so thankful to each and every one of you for making this trip. It's coming down here to learn. I'd especially like to thank our tremendous IAFF staff and the work that they've done to put this together. And all of the instructors that are going to bring all their knowledge and experience and share it so that you can go back and be a better leader for those families who entrusted you to protect them. I'd also like to thank the incredible staff here at the Swan and Dolphin. They have gone above and beyond for us, and we thank you very, very much. We're here for leadership. That's what ALTS is all about, Affiliate Leadership Training Seminar. Let's talk about leadership for a minute. It's not easy. Heavy as the crown, they say. It's not about bossing people around, although Kareen would probably correct you, my assistant. It's not about making all the decisions. Leadership in its toughest form is about doing the right thing when it's unpopular. It's not easy. You have to innovate, come up with new ways to solve problems. Try to think outside the box. Try to think big picture. Just because you do something new and try something new doesn't make it perfect, doesn't make it right. I mean, a union of any kind, I would argue, is not perfect. I would tell you the union of these 50 states aren't perfect. The union of the provinces in Canada isn't perfect. I would tell you my marriage is perfect. My wife might have a different view of it. But no union is absolutely perfect. One thing that is completely perfect about the IAFF is our mission. Our mission to protect each other. And it's not free. It comes with sacrifice, just like going out the door in a rig. You know, all of you took time away from your families. Maybe some of you got to bring your family with you. Good for you. But a lot of us had to leave our families. And I got to do it, honestly, in this job almost every single week. I kiss my kids goodbye and my wife goodbye. But I love this mission. And I know in my heart, one of the things that motivates me is they very well could be this mission. That when I go to work, it might be them. Now, we're here at ALTS to make us all leaders, to improve ourselves as leaders. I know I could use improving. Learn as much as you can while you're here. Soak it up like a sponge. We do have differences in divisiveness. That's part of human relations. It's who we are as a race, as species, as a being. Human relations isn't always easy. It's about how we treat each other, sometimes how we tolerate each other. We all come from different places. We were shaped differently. I come from one of 6 kids, and my father always says it amazes him how we all grew up in the same house with the same 2 parents, and we're all so dramatically different from each other. That's part of who we all are. We can have different ideas and different beliefs. That doesn't make us weaker. That makes us stronger as a union. For this IAFF to grow, and we need to, we have to embrace our differences. We have to embrace our diversity. In fact, we have to pursue it. This room doesn't look the same as it did 10 years ago when ALTS met. It won't look the same in 5 years or 10 years. And that's a good thing. That's growth. Think about your own firehouse or your fire hall up in Canada. Think about how different it is from 10 years ago. I think it's a lot younger than it used to be, judging by my own firehouse. I'll bet the names on the lockers are a little different too. That's why focusing on human relations is so important. I would argue with you that if we don't endeavor to perfect how we as IAFF leaders improve our ability to relate with each other, then we could be periled as an organization. That's why I want to thank our elected Human Relations Committee for all the work they do, day in and day out, to make this IAFF better. I know some couldn't make it today, and I fully understand why, and God bless you. I believe in your choice. Personal decisions. You do a great job. Now let me ask you a few questions. Think about the generational differences in the fire service since you started. I'll go back in my head to the turn of this century, 2000. I come from a pretty big department, Boston, you'd think pretty progressive. About the year 2000, maybe, could have been 99. That was when we all got portable radios. When I came on the job, only the roof man and the officer had a radio. And a lot of changes since then. Just think about the advent of terrorism on the scale that it was shown on 9/11, how we've changed. The changes are staggering. Think about cancer. When I came on the job, guys that broke me in said, hey, best job in the world, kid, you're going to have a ball. Try not to get killed. But just so you know, cancer's probably going to get you in the end. And a month ago, we were calling those same guys that broke me in. We called 31 of our retirees from my firehouse to come to the Christmas party. And out of 31 of our retirees in my firehouse, 19 of them have been diagnosed with cancer. That's staggering. One of my good friends who I worked with 2 days before Thanksgiving was diagnosed with pancreatic and liver cancer. Didn't get much of a retirement. Back then, you went to the doctor when you were sick. If you weren't sick, you wouldn't even know what your primary care physician, if you had one's name was. Fast forward to today, to right now. Yesterday, I went and got an ultrasound on all different systems in my body to check for cancer and any other issues that might happen. We've come a long way. We were a lot more aggressive than we used to be. And when it comes to cancer, we're doing everything we can, whether it's the partnerships we have, Firefighter Cancer Support Network. We just inked our agreement with the American Cancer Society, which also has our partnership in Canada, to make sure that the #1 researcher in the world for cancer, ACS, that we're in that fight, that we're fighting to make a difference and move that needle. We're also not afraid to take on the tougher fights. Things like those corporate interests that infuse our daily lives with carcinogens. We're going to fight that fight. We're going to take our collective might, jump in a ring with the gorilla, and fight. Think about how politics has changed. Think about how people kind of go in their corners. It used to be an agree to disagree. Our national politicians in Congress and the Senate, they could argue against each other on the floor and then take a vacation together the next week. Seems like we lost something along the way. Seems like how we interact as humans is changing. It feels different. The firehouse even feels different. Think about a generation ago, how your parents interacted with their neighbors compared to how we interact with ours today. People are a lot more reclusive. And when you have a difference, the vitriol is a lot more sharp. And it feels more dangerous. There's a lot of vitriol in our union right now. Just look at the issue of vaccine mandates and how our members have reacted to them. It feels like we did them wrong, like we've hurt them somehow. We've had affiliate leaders resign from their elected positions because they said, I didn't sign up for this. I took this job to help my brother and sister firefighters. Now I feel like they want to kill me. Doesn't feel good. Feels like there's something broken. I watched a documentary on Netflix called The Great Hack. I don't know if anyone's ever seen it. It's worth a watch. But it analyzes the 2016 presidential election. And essentially, it harnessed the power of the beast of social media that we know all over the world has overthrown governments, hung tyrants from street poles. It talks about how all of our data points are being warehoused and sold. Right now, data is the most expensive commodity in the world. And what they're selling, essentially, is us, our personalities, who we are. The first question in this documentary that was run by a college professor in the beginning of the documentary, he's talking to his class and he says, who here has gotten an ad through their social media feed and said to themselves, they have to be listening to what I'm saying? And every hand in the class got raised. That means they're studying us and who we are. They being whomever. In the case of the 2016 election, it was about trying to move the needle of the voter. They also have corporate America wants to sell us products and make money. They want to know who we are and how we move, how we think. And what happens is, the way algorithms work, you get fed what you seek. Your mind doesn't get opened as much. And as humans, it's our nature to harden into our resolve. Now that's a problem for the IAFF, but it's a global issue. It's about how we as human beings are evolving and how we communicate and have always done business. We got to think big picture. How do we overcome that challenge that's so big? How do we reach the young adults of today that are on the job? But not only that, I think about, and it scares me, my 15-year-old daughter and about her pals from school and how some of those kids will be testing to come on the job in 3 or 4 years. How do we reach them? We have to reach them wherever they are, whatever platform they're using to get their news from. I know me. I don't have a lot of time to watch the nightly news, maybe read a paper. I get my news through the phone. And I get fed what I like and what I forward. We as a union can't afford not to be competing for the consciousness of our membership. We have to be in the game. And one of the things we're going to do is invest big picture strategically. What's 2, 5, 10 years look like on how to communicate with the next generation of IAFF members? And what are we going to show them about the IAFF? How are we going to educate them? How are we going to lead them? You know, this is a generation of young kids that demand a return on their investment. They question everything. They used to be able to ask Siri any question they want. They don't cut checks anymore, they move money. In the firehouse, they pay with Venmo instead of putting dough on the chalkboard. The world's changing. What we have to provide them, or we will fail, is complete and total transparency. They have to believe in what they're investing in. You all know where I stand on transparency. We have to be honest. You've always gotten the truth from me, and that's a fact. The way this next generation thinks, we will lose them. There's no doubt if we're not transparent. New days require new ways. So how should we lead? It doesn't mean we all have to agree all the time. I know our executive board doesn't agree on everything. I'm sure yours back home doesn't either. But those issues, and that's what they are, issues, one at a time. Those issues that sometimes we fall on different sides of, that divide us, they appear in comparison to that which unites us. And at the end of the day, we're all firefighters. Those executive board members that I don't always see eye to eye to, if my family was trapped in a building, I would want them on the first due company. I know where their heart is. I know they have courage. We might beef over issues, but they're good people. And that's an important lesson. Think about the fire up in the Bronx yesterday. Those firefighters that responded to that horrific fire, which reminds us how dangerous what we do is, and how the need people have for us is so special. Every firefighter that responded that day wasn't the same. They were male, female, black, white, brown, LGBTQ. They were millennials, boomers, Gen X's. There were Republicans and Democrats, pro-vax, anti-vax. But when the box came in, they were all firefighters. All that mattered was the mission. There were people trapped. People were dying. They needed help. Our job is to jump in that void, that precipice of death, and pull people back. That's the mission. It's a dangerous job. We can do everything right and still die. The dangers of the job, however, are not as dangerous than our own divisiveness. The good news is there's a solution. Think about all that which divided us on September 10th, 2001, compared to what this country felt on 9/12, or in the wake of those tornadoes in Mayfield, Kentucky. Everyone was in it together. That's special. The solution to our divisiveness lies within us. We have to serve as union leaders in the same way we serve as firefighters when we go out the door, when we answer the bell. We need to lead as union leaders with the same empathy. We have to muster the same courage that we all do responding to a fire. We don't have to be perfect. We just have to be us. We have to be strong. We have to be firefighters. Thank you all for coming. Learn as much as you can while you're here so we can protect this union going forward. God bless you all. We'll be right back up.
Brothers and sisters of the International Association of Firefighters, your elected Human Relations Committee members. Representing African American Black category, Chairperson Nicholas Felton from New Orleans, Louisiana. Sherwood Smith from Kansas City, Missouri. Representing Canadian category, Ann Bryan from Kingston, Ontario. Clive Dehonorine from Ajax, Ontario. Representing Caucasian white category, Thomas Donovan from Cincinnati, Ohio. Dabney Hudson from Washington, D.C. Representing Disabled Handicapped category, Barry Stafford from Boston, Massachusetts. William Silva from Olympia, Washington. Representing Female category, Audrey Zarzak from Newport, Kentucky. Barbara Sellers from Shreveport, Louisiana. Representing Hispanic Latino category, Richard Gomez from Houston, Texas. Carlos Pacheco from Kansas City, Kansas. Representing LGBTQ category, Kevin Burkhart from Tucson, Arizona. Christian Cruz from Albuquerque, New Mexico. Representing others than already represented category, Secretary David Bautista from Orange County, California. Anita Paratley from San Francisco, California. Representing Veteran category, Roy Mocoso from St. Paul, Minnesota. Jorge Pena from New York, New York. And thank you to IAFF Human Relations Executive Board Committee Chairperson, District Vice President Mark Woolbright, and Vice Chairperson, District Vice President Mark Sanders. Brothers and sisters, the elected Human Relations Committee.
So for our next show, we have a very interesting, I hope, segment that we're about to do. I'd like to invite someone who really needs no introduction in this crowd. But I can tell you that our General Secretary Treasurer, my partner Frankie Lima, works as hard as anyone I've seen. He's tenacious. I've been on flights with Frankie. He's got cue cards going over every bit of the pension work that's being done, every bit of how our organization's finances operate. He is working his butt off to make sure that we as an organization are protected financially, which is very important in the long term. Frankie does an incredible job. Frank and I, for the first time, our General Secretary Treasurer is joining the stage at ALTS, and we're going to answer some questions that came directly from our attendees here. And I'd like to welcome up our General Secretary Treasurer, my partner Frankie Lima. Thank you, brother. Thank you. Hello.
There we go. Everybody hear me? Thank you, General President Kelly. It's an honor to be here. It's an honor to be back together, especially at an ALTS conference. One of my favorite ALTS conferences was 3 years ago in Los Angeles when we were trade unionists and 1,800 of us marched with the United Teachers of LA to help them get a contract. That's part of what we're all about. It's an honor to be here, be a principal officer with General President Kelly, and as your GST, to be your watchdog of your finances, to bring unity to this board, to fight when we have to fight for this board. And it reminds me of, we're looking at ALTS. over New Year's Eve and New Year's Day, I worked a 48-hour shift because companies were being closed and my dear friends were getting mandated into 8 days in a row. And as I sat down as a truck officer at the kitchen, I said, hey, my job today is to make sure you go home tomorrow. And we're going to go over a little bit of training for today, whether it's roof operations, aggressive interior attack, review something. And that's what we're doing here at the ALTS conference, as GP said. This is training. So, as my academy said, you train as if your life depends on it, because it does. Here, you need to train on it as if your sister and brother's livelihoods and their families depend on it, because it does. Take back what you learn here this week and fight better for your families, for your members. On the HR side, I was blessed to be part of the HR committee for several years, something I believe in near and dear. Diversity is our strength. Coming from the most diverse state in this country, we have to embrace it. And it really is easy. When you're working with people, we have divisiveness, as the GP said, in our country. It comes back down to our firehouses. And it comes down to simple things. You treat women like they were your sister or your daughter. It's that simple. You don't need a 90-page manual to do so. Treat everybody with respect. And I want to thank that HR committee for all they do. And as I wrap up, I'd like to just remind you to be united. Do everything you can. Not everything's a fight, but you know what? I'm sure as hell not afraid of a fight. And that's what we got to do and collectively do as union. Stay organized, care. If you leave here, leave with one word in your mind: care. Because if you care, you're going to do a good job, put in the long hours. Thank you, Mr. General President, for the time, and thank you for all that you do out there. Appreciate it.
Good job, Frankie. Good job, brother.
Thank you.
Oh, what's up with that mic? Okay. I got a mic on. I'd now like to invite Barbara Sellers from the elected Human Relations Committee to assist us with answering these questions. Barbara is a very sharp piece of work if you never met her. She's the president of the Shreveport Local 347, has been for quite a while. She's also served as a PEP instructor for years. She's also served on various accreditation and other EMS committee and done an incredible job. She's one of our most talented IAFF leaders, and we welcome her to the stage and thank you for assisting us answering these questions. I'd now like to ask our affiliate leaders to please come up and take a seat, and we'll walk through some Q&A and see if we can get some questions answered. Go get her. How you doing, brother? Jojo. Good to see you, brother. How are you? See you. How are you? Good to see you. Christian, why don't you start off?
Good morning. Christian Shader, Rochester Hills, Local 3472. I have a two-part question for you. Does the IAFF have any plans or strategies to increase and improve our numbers? And what has the IAFF seen as an effective strategy for locals to improve hiring prospects and tackle the issue of low candidate pools?
That's a great question. It's a relatively new advent for us as the IAFF. Traditionally, when we give an exam or open up application periods, we have a line around the corner of people who aspire to be firefighters. We're now in a time that's a little bit different. We have a dearth in candidates. That's a new challenge for us. You know, as a union, unlike the building trades, we don't do the hiring. We're not the hiring hall. We represent those that are hired by the departments. But it does present the challenge for us because it impacts our members. So it's something that we need to discuss. You know, we need to come up with a plan and make sure that our members that are being impacted by this, we're addressing their needs and concerns. I'd like to ask Barbara to please weigh in a little bit and what you think the
So in the hiring process, an elected human relations committee on the local level can assist with this. A lot can be realized when you bring the groups to the table that are going to actually have an ability to impact the hiring process through thoughts and innovation. This can be done when we think about the diverseness of our generations. We need to look at the workforce today and who is the majority and what are their thoughts and how can we connect with those in the target audience that we want to bring into the fire service. And doing that, we will be effective and moving forward and increasing those numbers in the hiring process by making sure that we're relevant and that we are touching the target audience that we are trying to bring in. So that elected human relations committee on the local level would be instrumental, and the IAFF has resources to help affiliate leaders develop those committees.
That's good. And it's also another question that had come up was about language. You know, are we going to have a plan going forward if we have to recruit into an immigrant population that doesn't speak English? You know, we have a large demographic up in Quebec that speaks French as their primary language. But we also know that as we go recruiting and we have, you know, a lot of our population centers have large immigrant populations of various descents. I know in my group, in my firehouse, in my working group, we now have a Vietnamese brother who is a Navy Seabee, and we also have a Chinese brother on the engine. So, you know, that's two totally different languages, and it's a new chapter of the IAFF that we have to think about. I know, you know, I think it's something we need to explore on how we're going to answer that call.
So to make sure that our workforce is diverse and it represents the communities in which we serve, we have to know those demographics. And that information will be instrumental in providing the necessary data so that we can effectively recruit the workforce that is going to be inclusive and representative of the community. So having that information by existing members in the workforce, as well as bringing in that information from the community, is going to help us be more effective. And then putting it to use into programs that are going to be able to touch the diverse workforce candidates, opportunities, and making sure that the message is being branded, that the fire service is looking to hire that diverse workforce, and that we have an open door, opening up the opportunity for everybody.
And if we're going to invest in recruiting, that costs money, you know?
Yeah, it does, GP. And that's something where you get the labor management partnership, and you got to tell your department to invest in recruitment. Invest through the Spanish-speaking media. Invest through the Russian community, the Armenian, the Vietnamese. You know, kids need to see firefighters walk in that look like them and know that they have a shot, you know, to do so.
And if we're, as a union, going to invest in it, which is what the question was, like, what are we going to do as the IAFF to ensure that we're meeting those needs? I mean, I think that it's one of those, it goes back to former General President Al Whitehead used to say, if you want it, you got to pay for it. And if we're going to make an investment, we have to come into convention and invest in it, you know? So, Joe, please introduce yourself.
Joe Van Hollen, Des Moines Professional Firefighters, Local 4. You know, we're obviously seeing the vaccine, testing, mask mandates coming out all over the place. It's happening in Iowa. It's also a mandatory subject to bargaining in Iowa. And then along with how the OSHA ETS is affecting all of us, what's going on at the IAFF to assist the locals and to better understand those things and to help us through those issues?
So let me take the OSHA ETS question first. It's a little more straightforward. The other one, a little more complicated. You know, the OSHA ETS only applies to OSHA states. So if you're not an OSHA state, it doesn't apply to you. And essentially what it does is it requires employers to have an infection control plan to make sure that you have PPE, including respirators, et cetera, gloves. Also that you have paid leave for vaccinations and making sure that you're trained up. So when you get into what's the IAFF doing when it comes to mandates. Now, as a union, we can basically do three things for our members. We can try to negotiate, which we've fought hard for. We've been in New Jersey, in Newark, New York City. We're fighting about it in Boston right now. We're out in Seattle. They're fighting in LA. So we can negotiate. We can litigate, which I'll talk about in a minute. Or we can, what I would say, take it to the streets and try to create enough public pressure to force the decision makers to come our way on our positions on, whatever it is. That's what the union can do in general. And in places where negotiations are non-existent, the option to litigate is your next opportunity. And when it comes to vaccine mandates, the US Supreme Court issued a ruling in 1905 that essentially said individual liberty is not absolute. Therefore, the government can force a vaccination on its population. Now, our standard from the relationship between employer and employee is lower than that. That's why all of our labor attorneys have looked at it and said that we don't have a real case to litigate that piece. Now, the ETS is enjoined in the courts, but that's a different argument. That's about whether or not the federal government can force an employer to enforce mandates, not whether or not an employer can enforce a mandate on their employees. So it's a challenge for us, in particular in places where the mandates generally are coming into places where the politicians aren't stupid. They do their polling. If their electorate's vaccinated, then they're willing to go out on a limb and enforce a mandate, which puts pressure on us because option 3 of going to the street and trying to put pressure on them, we have no audience. They look at us as public safety, public service. If they're vaccinated, why aren't you? It puts a lot of pressure on us. And it's a difficult animal. And quite simply, aside from having the political clout in your own jurisdiction to stave off a mandate, we don't have that ability to litigate it. And they're not mandated to negotiate it. And it puts us in a place where we don't have great options, you know? So when it comes to mandates, it's a tough subject, you know? So think about the LA story, Frankie.
Yeah, thank you, GP. You know, it's a tough topic, and the union's job is to mitigate risk. And General President Kelly and myself and the executive board came out very early. We recommend you get vaccinated, and we're opposed to mandates from day one. Still have members going, what's the IAFF stance? It's divisive. You get members that for the first time in my union career, probably 2 months after a firehouse got shot up in Los Angeles County, I was actually afraid of leaving town for my family from the threats that I got. From a group that it also ignores the dozens of line-of-duty deaths that our members have suffered. And what's the IAFF doing? The IAFF retroactively amended the public safety officer benefit to take care of our families. But and, you know, as I sit back and watch, even from my home local, a group of firefighters on their own, which they have the freedom to do so, hire an anti-union attorney that says, hey, you got the greatest case in the world, but I won't do it on a contingency. I need $500 from about 1,000 of you. And as they are getting stuck in the mud and lost their first lawsuit, down the line, what do? The next thing is, we'll blame the union and start dividing. And you look at their social media, 98% of them aren't even union firefighters. There are other people that are just anti-union out there chiming in, hey, why do you pay your dues anyway, and things like that. So to a certain degree, you got to take these people on with facts, remind them what we've done as a union, remind them what we do every day, remind them where we've been in the history. So,
Well, it's a very prescient point about how there seems to be a very organized movement. And I think that, and when we talked about algorithms and people that are studying us and data points, those that are seeking to impact the next presidential election are studying on how to weaken us as a union. And I believe this is one of those issues that flagged that there was some help along the way to organize an anti-movement against the union. I think that our enemies looked at this as public safety, police and fire's Janus moment. We can convince our unionized firefighters and police officers to turn against their unions. And that's what I see happening. You know, when I was up in New York, probably a month and a half ago, one of the questions that some of the affiliate leaders, the local leaders had, our IAFF leaders, was no one really knows who's running this. But they have a website, they have social media, they have all this stuff set up. How's that happening when no one really knows who's in charge? There's a man behind the curtain somewhere, you know? So, Brandon.
Check. Mr. Kelly, Brandon Donner, Adams County Fire out of Colorado, Local 2403. What steps does the IAFF plan to take next in the battle to change the bunker gear? And then have we thought about endorsing a gear manufacturer in return for changing their gear or removing the dangerous chemicals?
That is an incredibly important question. Just last week, the results of a study that the IAFF funded by Jennifer Fields, a doctor from the University of Oregon, showed conclusively that our bunker gear is loaded with carcinogens, all layers of it. Not just what we originally thought was our thermal barrier. That's scary. It really is. And we're not laying down on this one. This upsets me to no end, and it's a fight that we are going to take head on. And we have been taking head on. We've filed TIAs at the NFPA. Right now, the NFPA standard that governs our PPE, our bunker gear, is in the revision cycle, which means it's open for change. We're submitting input. We're also working with manufacturers. We're going to sit down with MSA and Globe in the next couple of weeks. And we're going to start working on what alternatives we have to a fluorine-free material that we can utilize in our gear. But really what we need to do is build the next generation of PPE for firefighters. We have, in the Build Back Better bill in Congress, we have $65 million to buy new gear. And Representative Kildee from Michigan, who's the lead sponsor, is committed that we are going to utilize some of that money to build new gear. And when you think about how we got here, it's a long evolution of building up this gear, from the earliest stages of bunker gear to where we are today. It's time to take a step back and look at everything. I mean, this gear might be the best in a flashover, but it might not be the best for traversing off an aerial ladder onto a roof. It might not be the best for our cardiovascular stresses. It might not be the best in a lot of ways. But we have to take a look at, it's time to revisit it holistically and come up with the next generation. So thank you. Jonathan?
President Kelly, thank you. Jonathan Puckett, Nashville Firefighters, Local 140, also home of the #1 team in the AFC, Tennessee Titans.
For now.
Thank you. My question's pretty straightforward. In the previous presidential election, we supported President Biden with the understanding that collective bargaining would be at the forefront of his agenda. What is the status of the federal legislation supporting collective bargaining?
That is an incredibly important question. And let me start by saying that President Biden has been a great friend to us. In the next speaker, you'll see what I mean. The problem we have with collective bargaining isn't Joe Biden. Joe Biden would sign that if we can get it to his desk. The challenge we have right now is that collective bargaining is bogged down in the House. It's bogged down because there's multiple collective bargaining bills that the politicians look at and say, if we're going to move one, we're going to move them all. We're not going to leave anybody behind. The challenge becomes there. You have a segment of the Democratic Party that wants police reform built into the collective bargaining bill, which would bog it down and kill it, and then a segment that will not pass anything unless the police sign off on it. So we're in this kind of a challenge where we're trying to bring people together. AFSCME's an elephant in size. We've met with the general president from AFSCME, Lee Saunders, who's an incredible leader, to develop ways that we can get this moving. Now, I will tell you, even if we're successful getting the House to move it, we're going to have a challenge in the Senate. In fairness, it's probably going to die in the Senate. But if you look at what we're doing, if you look at how we're being successful, notwithstanding the fact that we still have to fight it in Congress and push for it, we've been doing it for half a century, we're having success at the state and local level. The state of Virginia, kudos to them, President Bragg, just passed collective bargaining for Virginia. The city of Atlanta, flagship of the South, passed collective bargaining. We at the IAFF, we're looking at that. We invest in how to move it in the Congress. We're going to pivot a bit and start investing in how to move it in piecemeal. Show that it works. Show that it's not a threat. And we're getting there, you know? Frankie?
Yeah. On the political divisiveness, it's very simple. We really don't care if you got a Republican or a Democrat behind your name. What are our issues, our narrow scope of issues, and do you support them or not? And then, were you an elected official prior to this, and what's your voting record? Speaks for itself. It's like recruiting a baseball player. Would you bat the last 10 years? Where you at? Where you been? We support those who support us. I mean, we fought a recall for Democratic governor in California. We support a Republican governor in Maryland of Hogan. We support and give a lot of money to both sides of the aisle.
Exactly. And, you know, when it comes to divisiveness, it goes back to the human relations argument. Talk about we have differences of opinions on issues, not holistically. And I think HR plays a role there, too, in our political arguments in the kitchen, or the locker room, or the main floor. So, Barbara.
So it's essential to have those relationships where everybody can sit down and feel safe discussing the differences. And so an HR committee can absolutely facilitate, especially on the national level when we see the divisiveness within our own ranks as it relates to support of political candidates. But at the end of the day, if we center the conversation back to what our mission is, and those are firefighter issues. And so we find that common ground. We make sure we value and listen to everybody's perspective, but then we get right back to our mission, and that is advancing firefighter issues and standing with those that stand with us.
Amen. Thank you very much. Okay, Jeff.
Hey there. My name's Jeff Teeter. I'm the Secretary-Treasurer at Gresham Professional Firefighters, Local 1062. My question was, at the international level, do we have a plan for reducing the federal Medicare, Medicaid age for retired firefighters?
That's a great question. It's one that is a major challenge for many, many of our members, and I'll explain why, because it's not the same everywhere. In a lot of our jurisdictions, our employer doesn't provide health care after retirement. So you may have your time and age. You might have 30 years on the job, but only be 50 years old. You're entitled to retire and collect your pension, but you'd have to come out of pocket for your own health care. So obviously, that's a problem. Our solution has been to try to get the federal government to adjust Medicaid so that our public safety officers, our firefighters, we include the cops in this, can enter into that at a younger age than is currently allowable. Now, the challenge that we have, we've never been successful doing it, the challenge we have right now is the Democratic platform is single-payer health care. It's to build the Affordable Care Act. They don't want to open up a back door for anybody. They want to force everybody into it. And on the Republican side, their agenda, their platform, is to not fund it at all. So for us, if we're going to wait for that solution, we're going to be waiting a long time. So what we've done, and I give great credit to the IAFF Financial Corporation and our COO, Kurt Becker, who Frank is the CFO and I serve as the CEO of, we've partnered with the Northwest Firefighters Trust. And we're going to be providing a health care option all across the United States for our members to enter into. And it's an exciting opportunity. I think it's going to be game-changing. And it's a move in the right direction.
Yeah, just like the GP said, it's about options, it's about opportunity. And quite frankly, right when we go across this room, if we polled everybody, this person has lifetime medical care in their union. This person, when they retire, they get zero until they're 65. This person gets $200 flat rate a month that still has to have a big out-of-pocket for an HMO plan, stuff like that. So we're bringing an option, this IAFF, for our members to have health care, when they retire.
Thank you, Frank. And of course, we need our financial corporation to be successful. We've got great products. We've shopped, and one of the other great things we're doing, you may be familiar with the Well Fitness program that the IAFF launched years ago. We're going to do a financial fitness program so that our firefighters can get the financial counseling they need to make sure they're protecting themselves in the long run. There's great products there. Pay attention to it. With that, I turn it over to Heath.
Good morning, General President Kelly. Heath Good, Norwich Township Firefighters, Local 1723, Hilliard, Ohio. How will the IAFF continue to support our membership related to behavioral health?
Well, behavioral health is such a massive issue, really in the world, and it goes back to, I think, a lot of the world's behavioral health issues stem back from how we communicate and human relate. With us, it's particularly poignant from the exposures that we have. And one of the most important things we do after a critical incident is peer support. We have trained over 7,000 of our members in peer support. All of you know we have our own Center of Excellence in Upper Marlboro, Maryland, specialized just for firefighters. We're expanding that to the West Coast. In Hemet, California, we'll be opening up our West Coast Center of Excellence. We're also building out equal treatment for our firefighters in Canada that can't access these centers down here. And we're exploring new initiatives. There's an interesting program, give it a Google, called Previdence. It's the first behavioral health tool I've seen that is actually pre-screening. It's before the crash. It's before somebody spirals so far that they need to be sent to a rehab or treatment. It's an interesting system. So we're exploring new ways to do it. We're not going to turn our back on it. We're not going to disappear from it. Behavioral health comes right back to the mission of the IAFF of taking care of each other and our families. And we're going to get better at it, and it's going to do, we're going to continue to forge ahead in behavioral health. I'd like to ask Barbara just a couple of questions. Now, many people, unless you are aware of what the Human Relations Committee can do, you wouldn't know the valuable tools you have access to help you. So I'd like, Barbara, if you could, just expand a little bit on what an human relations technical assistance looks like.
So we have many types of technical assistance that have taken place to date. Members of the elected Human Relations Committee are deployed when affiliate leaders identify an area within their own local that they need additional support and resources, and the IAFF is very responsive to that. Those issues may be unique, they may be similar to us all. The IAFF creates and develops a module that's specific for that affiliate. Lots of preliminary meetings take place so that they can discuss what the issues at hand are, what the expectations are. So when the members of the elected Human Relations Committee actually responds out to the affiliate, that they can meet those needs head on. Then there's subsequent follow-up with the IAFF, making sure that the affiliate leaders have what they need and that they are advancing forward in a positive manner, and the identification of next steps. The types of issues that we might see come forward, it can be discrimination, it can be issues on the national level, such as we saw in 2020, it can be the COVID discussion, it can be all types of discussion. It's not limited to anything, it's limitless with what we find to be what the need is within our membership. So I encourage all of you to take advantage of those resources that the International has put before us to help us become stronger and more united. Because when there's inclusion, there's always inspiration, and there will be unification because of it.
I think that's an important note. I mean, traditionally we view human relations through the lens of male, female, black, white, LGBTQ. I think we have to change the dynamic. We just have to look at it as human relations is the cure to divisiveness. When you have a problem in your local, you should reach out. Develop a strategy with the Human Relations Committee on whatever it is, whether it's endorsements, vaccines, whatever's dividing your union, we have to find a solution for. And human relations is the key to help you with that. So I think it's very good. So, Barbara, real quick, it's very important that human relations on the job, it plays a pivotal role in workplace productivity and culture and customer engagement, even resource management. What are the skills to improve communication and collaboration amongst firefighters in the workplace?
One of the skills that we can all take notice of is making sure that we value our employees or value our workforce. We make sure that everybody feels as if they have a place and that they can come to work and have the same afforded opportunity that's placed before all of us, making sure it's accessible, it's equitable, and it's opportunities there, and people know how to find those processes. That is essential in sending the message to the members that we represent at home that their issues matter. And I assure you they're observing us to ensure that we are doing that. Human relations is an opportunity to make sure that those seats at the table can put a voice to the concerns that our members are talking about in the corners in the stations, bringing them to light, giving them the platform to be heard, but not only to be heard, but to advance those concerns for the betterment of the organization.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you all very much for your question. You have to get up right now because there were a few more questions that came in, but we couldn't load the stage up too much that are worth answering. And I turn it over to GST for one of those questions.
Yes, General President, if I get it right, Local 2, Pat Kwan, and it was, how are the dues, composed? And then why did we have 2 raises in 2021? Why did our dues go up 2 times in 2021? The first one's very easy. Your dues are composed of convention action and convention resolutions designated in 8 accounts, one of which is cancer research, one of which is convention minimals, one of which is disaster relief operations, our foundation, our reserve account, and then we also have PAC, Emergency Disputes Fund, and our general fund, which is the lion's share of our dues. Now in 2021, we were supposed to have a convention in August of 20. Normally, those resolutions and assessments that come up at the August convention take effect on September 1st. However, due to COVID, we pushed the convention back to February of 2021. Upon completion of convention in 2021 and the action that the delegates took with resolutions, they were applied retroactively a couple, I think 2 or 3 weeks, and it started on February 1st. So hence, in 2021, that was the first raise of dues that theoretically could have or should have been retroactively back to September, but they weren't. Now, we also passed Resolution 1, which is sometimes a little, I don't know about divisive, but it was always like a little speed bump at every convention. And it was just simply inflation, something that the GP brought up with Al Whitehead. If you want it, you got to fund it. He's the one that brought our first line item budgets to the IAFF, and he's the one that brought a convention resolution for inflation. So as we voted for the inflation resolution to become permanently put into our Constitution and bylaws, so that means next convention, there won't be a Resolution 1 dealing or battling with inflation. It's right there in our Constitution. It deals with the Consumer Price Index for workers, calculated from April 1st to March 31st every year. And this past year, it was 3%, a little over 3%, I think 3.01. And that was applied September 1st of 2021. Hence, the 2 reasons why our dues went up 2 times in 2021. So hopefully that clarifies anything. I'll be teaching a per capita class here at 3:30, and we got a lot of other stuff. If you need anything on per cap, let me know. GP, back to you, sir.
Thank you, Frank, and I appreciate it. We received several other questions on a topic. The first one that came in on this topic was another Local 2 member. Their president, Jim Tracy, asked a question which was, Chicago sends $1 million a year to the IAFF. Why can't I read the EPC reports? And we got several other questions after that. Fact of the matter is, I've been clear. I think you should be able to see them. I think it will help build us into a stronger union. The fact of the matter is, the majority of the executive board felt differently. I felt that by not releasing them, we could face more scrutiny. What I can tell you is that you may very well get a chance to read those reports. There's going to be a vote this upcoming convention, and it's for you to weigh in and decide what transparency means in the IAFF. So I thank you all, and I thank our guests for coming up on stage with us and asking very good, poignant, relevant questions. And I thank you all for caring and what you do for the IAFF. And Barbara, thank you on behalf of the GST and I. Thank you for joining us on stage. Thank you very much. I thought that was good job. Yep.
Let's get dirty.
Brothers and sisters, if I could just ask you to please take your seats. It's now time to hear from our keynote speaker, a true superstar in the fire service. Started her career down in Memphis, Tennessee. And her talents put her right in Washington, D.C., working for the IAFF, where she rose to the position of the head of the TIR division, building the data which is so important to us. These past few years, she's been the president and CEO of the Fire Service Data Institute. And we're very proud to say that one of us has been named the U.S. Fire Administrator by President Biden. Brothers and sisters, welcome our own Dr. Laurie Moehr, the U.S. Fire Administrator.
Good morning. How exciting this is for me to get to come home. I am really, really thrilled to be able to be with you this morning and that you're all here and that I can see half of your faces. So thank you for allowing me to be here with you today. What an amazing program so far. Very insightful to the change, right? Insightful to what we have all been going through and yet looking forward. Visionary to what is going to be happening in this union and in the fire service in general. So based on the theme, moving our union forward, and certainly I'm going to apply that to the whole fire service, moving the fire service forward, we have work to do, don't we? You know, the last year, 2 years really, has been traumatic for all of us. We have been through many, many events, not the least of which is a global pandemic that we still remain. But we've watched racial division. We have watched events take place. Australia burned, by the way. Our whole West Coast burned. And even in the 9 days of this year, when we had so much hope that things would change, 31 plus fire fatalities. Just 2 fires representing those 31. And there are many, many others that have taken place. In fact, we're likely approaching 100 civilian fire fatalities if we were to add them up. That is a disaster, isn't it? And so we have to do things with a vision toward how do we change, given a complex problem. You know, often we talk about crisis, and it seems like these crises, it's just been piling on for 2 years. And we all look for change, and we hold on to hope that things will change. But what I want to say to you is that we cannot revert back to where we were pre-pandemic. Are you guys hearing music? I just want to make sure I'm not going nuts. Okay, good. All right, so I'm sure they're working on that. But we want to look at these crises really as opportunities. And we can't say, you know, this is our new normal, and we're just going to live in this new normal. Okay, I'm going to say, guys in the back, we do have music coming through one of the speakers. Okay, I'm going to just assume that's going to get fixed. Okay, given that, we cannot remain either in what we often are calling a new normal. This is not a new normal. We can't stay here. And yet we have to move forward, right? So how do we transform? How do we reinvent as we need to move forward? In what ways do we transform? So crisis to opportunity, and there's always opportunity in crisis. We simply have to find it. And we have in the pandemic and in all of these things that have been piling on now for 2 years. We know that during crisis there are incentives, there are motivation for us to do things differently, aren't there? We have to figure out what is the way. We are intuitive, we are thoughtful as human beings, and we have to look forward, and certainly as public servants. So we have found new ways to do things that we didn't have a playbook for. We had no playbook for a pandemic. We didn't know how we were going to respond, and yet those opportunities are there. So what do we see typically in a crisis as far as behaviors and how people step up? First of all, rapid problem solving. That happened, didn't it? How many of you would have liked to have invested in the plexiglass industry before this pandemic, right? So we had innovative problem solving. The vaccine, faster, because we had global scientists working on this. And so we had innovation, we had problem solving, we had technology that was taking place. There's also increased resiliency. And we've often heard, you know, if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger. Well, that's not true for everything. But in some cases, we have seen protocol changes that we won't revert back, right? How we decide, how we deploy to EMS events has likely changed in many of your departments, where we're not exposing, 6 people to whatever is happening in the event. So building that resilience, your overtime protocols, station hygiene, many of these things we won't revert back. So we have built in some increased resiliency. Other things that happen, new levels of cooperation. Before, a lot of us hadn't had the opportunity to work with public health in your local governments, but I bet you do now. We see levels of cooperation and rivals coming together to problem solve during a crisis. And so working with the hospitals, working with, even between labor and management, and how do we move forward? Where are the opportunities? We also see systemic change when something happens. And I refer here to the collapse, a building collapse in Surfside down here in this state, just a few hours south of here. If you don't think building code changes are going to come out of that, and so it's unfortunate that often it takes a crisis for us to have change. And I believe these 2 fires that we've seen in the last 9 days, we are going to facilitate change. I can tell you the USFA is going to try very hard to try to address this complex problem. And so we have seen things that happen, opportunities out of crisis. There have been dramatic policy shifts that have taken place during these last 2 years. These policy changes, what we have watched in a divided nation, and yet we have attention now on what we are referring to in short as DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I'm going to address that more with you in just a moment. But these are the kinds of dramatic policy shifts that happen with societal change. And given that, we also see often an emergence of talent. I can tell you that, I was at the IAFF for 26 years. I've been retired now for about 3 years. And half of the faces in this room I don't recognize. That's how fast turnover is happening. And so good for you guys stepping up. It's important to watch the emergence of talent. It's important to watch as people step up and step into the gap to lead. And so we watch as that happens during crisis as well. And you know, you heard this morning both the General President and the General Secretary Treasurer talk about leadership and some of the attributes of leadership. Now, in public safety, often we are referred to, and we refer to ourselves and try to embody what we call servant leadership. Servant leadership theory says that you lead from the front, but you lead as if others' lives depend on it. You lead with character and integrity because that matters. Because when people choose to trust you, they are making themselves vulnerable. And so you must be committed to that trust. That's servant leadership. And I want you to hold that because that is incredibly important. But in this moment, I want to also tell you about transformative or transformation leadership theory. Because as we are all servant leaders, we must also now become transformational leaders. In crisis, we have to change. We have to bring hope and opportunity. And so given that, here's a little bit about transformational leadership theory. In other words, it is a place where leaders and followers bring each other up. We advance each other. In other words, it's an all hands on deck moment. All hands on deck, come with me. That's transformational leadership. And given that theory, we are going to have new rules, new skill sets, new mindsets, new capabilities. And so, yes, are we having an evolution in leadership? You bet we are. And it's being driven by crisis, it's being driven by the opportunities that are here. And for those who step up to lead, it is a time for transformative leadership. And so in this, what are we going to see? Well, components of transformational leadership are these. The first one is intellectual stimulation, right? And being open with communication. We are going to have leaders that encourage creativity. If you are set on status quo, you're going to be left behind. We've always done it this way, it's not going to work. We have to move forward with creativity and education, which is why you're here, and transparency, and looking for opportunities for change. We also are going to watch for individuals to step up, and leaders recognize it. And don't think new leadership or those who are coming behind you are threats. No. Raise them up. Remember, all hands on deck, come with me. That's transformational leadership. We are going to raise them up. Take a moment to recognize talent. Take a moment to encourage, but also hold accountable new leaders. This is important, and that's what we see in transformational leadership. Here's a couple of other components. One of the things that you're going to see is that it is inspirational. You know, people choose to follow things that touch their hearts. And I heard the General President say it is always about the mission. I'm going to say it again. It is always about the mission. Whether it is the IAFF or the USFA, it is always about the mission. And so it is personal. It's a clear vision for where you want to lead, where you want as the mission to move it forward. The last portion that I'll share with you about transformational leadership is that it has an opportunity for influence. You can influence by your very role model. You don't just talk the talk, you walk the walk, and you do so consistently. There's no room for moodiness. There's no room for, who's going to show up today when they walk in the office, your good self or your bad self. Consistent leadership matters. And I often say this to chiefs, your crew should not have to worry about who's showing up at the station today. right? What kind of mood you're going to be in. That matters. And so being consistent and being a role model and talking the talk, walking the walk matters with transformational leadership. So where do we start? I want to put this in context for you because otherwise it's just theory, right? And so if we put transformational leadership in context, and I want to do that in a couple of places. I want to talk a little bit about preparedness, resilience, and of course DEI, as I said, because I want to make sure we're all on the same page when we say DEI. And so let's start with preparedness and resilience. You know, often within FEMA, we hear Administrator Criswell, first of all, she's a rock star, by the way, but we also often hear her talk about community preparedness and community resilience. Well, one of the things that I've tried to focus on, and this is an outgrowth, obviously, of my time with you, is that we have to focus on preparedness and resilience of our departments and our responders. So as we look at preparedness and resilience, to put this in context, the transformation process as transformation leaders in the preparedness realm, what does that look like? Well, we've got to be able to look at threats and new threats. Because today is different than it was 2 years ago in our society, isn't it? Today is different. We have different threats and they have evolved significantly. One of the things that we saw just a year ago on January 6th revealed hatred in this country that had been hidden deeply. We don't like to see it, but at least we know now where it is. It's in your communities. And if you as the fire service is not prepared to at least admit and understand that those threats are real, then you're going to be behind when it's time to respond to an event. And so we have to look at foreign and domestic threats. We have to look at grievance-based violence. We have to watch social media platforms. We have to be prepared. And so it's a new day. We need transformative leadership to admit and to look for those opportunities. Where do we prepare? And of course, all of this is in the midst of an ongoing pandemic. We have to make sure that we are preparing for the next, not just the last event. And so the threats remain. The weather events, climate change is real. I hope you understand that because you're responding to the evidence across this country. Wildland fires, opioid crisis, civil unrest, all of these things. This is your operational environment, is it not? And so preparedness matters. This is where we have to think ahead. In the federal government, we certainly have formulas for looking at risk assessment, and I can tell you that the IAFF looks at these formulas as well, because this is exactly how we evaluate your systems in the past, and I know they continue to do so. Where are the vulnerabilities? What's the value? What's the consequence of an event occurring? And so there are formulas there to help you, and I know the IAFF is prepared to continue that. And so as we prepare, watch the data. And I love any time anybody talks about data, obviously, you all know that. But to hear the General President this morning talk about data as a commodity, because it is. Data in this realm, very important as well. Your demographics, your structures, the hazard levels. And I know you're here as labor representatives, but you are also here as firefighters. And this kind of preparedness matters because often it can mean either injury or life and death for you. And so watching and understanding how the departments need to prepare for these vulnerabilities in your communities. And I will tell you in my many conversations with the FBI, for example, the threats that we have, if you have houses of worship, particularly in the Jewish community, you better be alert because that is the most targeted threat in this country. And so I'm being very frank with you because this matters. We have to understand that in the fire department, and we can talk about staffing, we can talk about deployment all day. When you deploy to an event, you will never have enough resources. So we have to think ahead, we have to plan, we have to be prepared. Now let's talk about resilience. Because as we look at resilience, and I said my focus is on you. Resilient responders matters. And so there's a fine line between stress and wellness, isn't there? And so looking at resilience and what that means matters. What is individual resilience? I know the IAFF has focused on this, but unfortunately, over the last 2 years, you've not had the opportunity to really be together to talk about resilience. You've got programs that are in place, but just to talk about it for a moment this morning, it involves your behaviors, your thoughts, your actions, well-being. In other words, it's how you handle something bad, like these pile-on crises we've had for 2 years, and you get back up from it. Let me ask you a question. What does a boxer do when they get knocked down? They get back up, right? These are the kinds of things, this is the kind of thought process and the resilient behavior that we have to practice in ourselves and we have to look for. And it's developing coping skills to help you process bad things and get them out of your head and move on in a healthy way. When we talk about individual resilience, certainly a disaster can impair that. Certainly 2 years of a pandemic can impair that. Societal changes and the stresses and watching the news can impair that. And so what we want to talk about are the things that happen to you, the grief, the sadness, this range of emotions that we all process or try to process, and you being able to work through them. That's resilience. It's being able to move past and rebuild your life, right? Cope and move past. But I want to tell you that we have an entire generation plus that have very little resilient skills. You know, many generations, and particularly my own, and I'll say the more senior folks in the room, we were all left to our own devices to get hurt. You fall down, you skin your knee, you get up, you brush it off, mom gives you a Band-Aid and you move on. But we have perhaps over time overparented, overprotected, overshielded, and to a point that we have entire generations who do not have resilient coping skills. And so I implore you, and I say this to fire chiefs everywhere I go, we have to teach them what they do not have. We have to build mental resilience where it does not exist. If we do not in the fire service, then you are going to watch our suicide rate continue to escalate. We must intervene. Transformational leadership in this context means stepping up. It means making sure that the IAFF resilience program is out, or that you find a similar program and we build resilience where it does not exist. Desired resilience says that when we are in diverse or adverse situations, when we have resilience, we can sustain. We want to have the mental and emotional behavioral ability to cope with whatever is before us, have positive outcomes, adapt to change, and stay healthy. In fact, even grow. Looking at crisis as opportunities, not threats. That is resilience. And so I want you to focus on that as you think about transformation and leadership. The next thing that I want to put in context, as I said to you, we're going to talk a bit about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I love these two graphics. I want you to focus on those for just a moment, because I think these speak volumes, and some of them maybe you've seen them. But what is diversity? Right? What does that look like? What is equity and inclusion? Now, diversity we can talk about in just a moment. I'm going to bring more on that, but inclusion kind of makes sense, right? Everybody at the table. The one that we struggle with is equity, because we all think it means equality. Now, if I hand out everybody the exact same turnout gear, regardless you're all getting the same size, that's not equity, right? That's equality. You all got a set of turnout gear and it was all the same size. That's equality. But equity means I'm going to fit you and I'm going to give you turnout gear that fits you. And for the women in the room, I guarantee you that's been an issue. That's equity. When we are teaching at the academy and you insist on teaching the way we've always done it, with textbooks and giving paper-written tests, and there are people who have never even really taken a test on paper in their lives, and you're expecting them to perform, that's not equity. We have to teach people the way they learn. We have to adapt, right? And we have to be able to lift people up in the way that they need to be taught. That's equity. I hope that makes sense to you, because it seems that that's the one we struggle with often. So let's talk a little bit about diversity. I want to first say to you, diversity is not about race. It's about much, much more. It is about ethnicity. It's about understanding differences in mindset. It's about generational differences. That's diversity, right? And often we need to start by listening to people who are not like us. It's about understanding and celebrating differences. You just saw many of the questions that were answered about diversity. So diversity, equity, inclusion means that we are looking for psychologically safe workspaces. In the IAFF, I know you have fought for years for physically safe work environments, haven't you? Everything from our gear to the station environment, on and on. Crew size, right? All of those things that focus on safety, we now need to focus on psychologically safe workspaces. Cultural awareness of underrepresented groups. Looking at the challenge to transform behavior. We often say, oh, let's change the culture. Well, I'm going to tell you, changing culture is not an easy task, because we don't understand that to change culture, you have to change individual behavior. That's where it starts. When we tolerate behaviors, that remains the culture. So to change culture, to have psychologically safe workspaces, we cannot tolerate individual behaviors that are adverse to that. And so we have to think about transformational leadership as the foundation. And let me ask you a question. How do you as professionals lead people who are not like you? Do you find that difficult? Because we all lead based on our own beliefs, our own value systems, right? Of course you do. That's your inspiration, right? So how do you lead someone who is not like you, who doesn't believe the same way you do, who's made different life choices that you don't agree with, personally? We have to be professionals. That's how you do it. Regardless of what they look like, the life choices they made in the moment, you have to make sure they are the best firefighter they can be. You have to make sure they're the best labor leader they can be. So it is being professional. Another way that we can do that, and some of you who have taken leadership classes from me over the years have probably seen this. Now, firefighters are very accustomed to looking at ladders, right? Let's climb this one. How do we do it? Often we start with judging people because they're not like us, right? And if we start off with that, we do it based on our own preferences, right? We look at people and their actions based on our perception. We judge them. And yet, we judge ourselves based on our intent. Have you ever heard that? We judge other people based on our perceptions, but we judge ourselves based on our intent. Well, I meant to. So we have to do that differently. We've got to seek understanding. Now, I want to emphasize this. As you try to understand people who are not like you, that does not mean you agree with them. I'm not asking you to do that. What I'm asking you to do is be transformative enough to listen and to try to understand perspective. Not meaning agreement. And maybe we can reach the rung on the ladder to respect differences. Still don't agree with you, but I respect where you're coming from. I understand and I respect that. Perhaps we can even move to appreciating differences and ultimately valuing them because of the differences and what they bring to the table. So in transformational leadership, it is about being genuine. It's about the willingness, and commitment to lead other people. And I give you this quote: leadership is about people and for people. And it is always about the mission. So, what does a transformed organization look like? And this is where I want to spend just a couple of minutes telling you about the USFA. Do you know that this is the first time that the USFA has had a presence at an IAFF event? It shocked me too, so it's okay to go, So, it is the first time, but we are here. There are 4 stars in our logo, and the eagle has a name, by the way. Does anybody know what the name is? You don't. I didn't either. The eagle's name is Hotfoot. And we have 4 stars. And those 4 stars mean training. They mean technology and research. They mean data. That one makes me excited. And they mean public education. That is the mission of the USFA. That is the mission that we are focused on. And I want to do that alongside the IAFF and the IFC and the other national organizations. So what are we doing? Immediately, I have realigned wildland resources so that they are not 2 levels below the administrator, but report directly to me. And so wildland, we are focused, very focused on you. And many of you understand that wildland fire is no longer, a California problem. It's not just a Colorado problem. It's affecting all of us. And so if you're not responding directly, you're often doing move-ups or mutual aid for those who are. The other thing is that we're looking very heavily at an EMS branch within the USFA. Right now, I have 2 people who focus on EMS out of 120. That's not enough. And so we're looking at how do we figure out and raise up those resources within the USFA. And the other thing I think you probably would have known already, and that's our data situation. 20 years it's been since the INFERS was updated. 20 years. I didn't misstate that. Technology changes so fast. That's like, 7 generations or more of technology and data and information. So we're going to work very hard to streamline the data systems so that we can collect more streamlined, fact-based, real-time information. I want you to be able to leverage that data to tell your story. How do we maintain, and you all are talking about resources at the local level, and that is absolutely critical. But we can't tell our story, we can't even advance without the data. And so we're going to work very hard to make sure that our National Data Center is prepared to support our state, local, territorial, and tribes. So with that, I want to say to you that on behalf of President Joe Biden, Secretary of Homeland Security Mayorkas, FEMA Administrator Deanne Criswell, and all of the men and women of the USFA, may God bless you and all those on the front lines. Thank you again for letting me come home for a day.
Dr. Laurie, cue the mic. Dr. Laurie, thank you so much for joining us, taking time out of your busy schedule to be here. Ordinarily, we'd be presenting you with a gift right now. However, we thought about it. And we knew that in your office, I'm sure you have some IAFF memorabilia, but we wanted to mat and frame a beautiful picture of you as the U.S. Fire Administrator addressing the IAFF for the very first time. So we'll be delivering that to your office, and hopefully it graces the walls in the U.S. Fire Administration.
That is perfect, sir.
Excellent.
Perfect.
Thank you so much
you.
for everything you do.
Thank you.
Thanks, Doc. We love you, buddy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Take it easy. Our charitable work at the IAFF is so important to our mission. It's very much who we are. Our own IAFF Foundation does fabulous work. We help our members, and we help their families. Whether it's disaster relief after a hurricane, more recently in Kentucky, whether it's the burn fund, not only for our members, but also to help children that are burned. Our firefighter memorial, where we ensure that our brothers and sisters who make the ultimate sacrifice are remembered forever, and that their children have scholarship opportunities to forward their education. And more recently, the advent of ensuring our members have access to the behavioral health they need at the Center of Excellence. We do a tremendous job, and we're going to get better at it. But we also need partnerships, and we have tremendous partners, like-minded missions. But our longest, and I would argue, proudest charitable endeavor has been our long-time relationship with the Muscular Dystrophy Association. The mission of the MDA moves our hearts, and it has for years. Helping those kids, it's every bit of who we are as firefighters. With us here today is the CEO of MDA, a true friend of the IAFF. He's been in the battle against muscular diseases for nearly half a century with the same love, commitment, and passion that we do jumping on a rig. Please welcome and say hello to Dr. Don Wood. Doc, come on up. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you
great to see you.
Great to see you. I cannot tell you how honored and proud I am to be here. And like the previous speaker, I think I am the first CEO from MDA to join this conference.
Hopefully you continue to.
Oh, I would love to. This is a fantastic, fantastic group. And I also want to thank all the staff for putting this together and how honored and proud I am to be part of this. But before I start on my comments, I have to say something else more from my heart than anything else. I don't know about you guys, I am bloody tired of COVID. Anybody agree? Anybody agree? Let's hear it. Hey, let's get over it. It's time we take our lives back. It's time we take our lives back. And I have to say that this conference represents a huge step forward. We've talked about leadership, or we've heard about leadership up here all the time. You folks have taken a leadership role in holding this huge conference when others around have declined. They're still canceling things. You've taken a leadership role, and I'm so proud to be a part of this. It takes courage to do what General President Kelly and all of you are doing. Is when everybody else is pulling back, we're going forward. It feeds the soul, as well as so good to see all of you. Well, half of you, depending on how much you look at. So thank you again for holding this conference, for having the courage to do it, and for allowing me to become part of it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. It's, I think that's a very prescient commentary. I think it's relevant right now, and it's about that human relations that we're doing here. And making sure that we can interact with each other. So, Doc, the pandemic's been tough on a lot of people and a lot of organizations.
Yep.
Especially organizations like MDA that rely on charity to be successful. And I know that we've suffered. The MDA has suffered. But we like to jump in a fight.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And what can we do as the IAFF to help the MDA to get back on track to recover from this COVID pandemic?
Hold us accountable.
Okay.
That's the simple thing. Hold us accountable. We want to be your partner. We want to be your partner. And I don't know how many of you know it, my son-in-law is on the job in Lexington, Massachusetts. So I got family here. The other thing I have to tell you is my dad was a union member. So I'm really excited, doubly so, to be part of this great group. But what can firefighters do to help you? What can we do to help the firefighters? Before I answer the question, I have to say many of you are new and younger, as you pointed out. We're seeing a different demographic as time goes on, etc. I don't know that everybody understands truly the difference that firefighters have made in the lives of not only those with neuromuscular disease, but those with disabilities. When the firefighters started supporting MDA back in the early 1950s, there were two unions that started this support for MDA. One was the National Letter Carriers, and the other was IAFF. First $1 million MDA got was from union members. So my heart is obviously with union members. But what you've done over the last 65 years is something unprecedented. When people look at America as having the greatest healthcare system in the world from the standpoint of the technology, the research, the frontiers that we have led, not many people know that when we started, there was no specialty of neuromuscular disease. What you folks and your generations before you have done, working with the Muscular Dystrophy Association, is allowed us to create an entirely new medical discipline, neuromuscular disease. What you and others like you have done to support Muscular Dystrophy Association is put together an unprecedented network of clinics. We have over 150 clinics treating people with neuromuscular disease. The most important thing, however, is when you started supporting the Muscular Dystrophy Association, most people with these diseases didn't live past childhood or into their teens. Well, guess what, folks? Guess what? This past year alone, 2 more treatments for neuromuscular disease were approved by the FDA. We now have, because of your help, because of what you have done over these last 69 years, over 20 FDA-approved treatments for diseases. Yes, 20. When I started with MDA 40 years ago as head of research at MDA, you know how many treatments we had then? 0. It's all happened in this last period of time, and it's continuing to go on. The mission keeps going. And when you say, what can you do to help MDA? Let me tell you, folks, your support is pushing the frontiers of research, not only for people with neuromuscular disease, but because, and hear me closely, because they are genetic diseases, we are on the forefront of genetic medicine. We are working with the FDA to learn how to figure out how do you approve treatments for diseases that don't affect millions. We are also working, and I'm proud to say, with any other organization, because I'm a partner I like teamwork and bringing in partners, etc. We're also working with other charities in the neuromuscular disease space. Why? Because they're covering genetic diseases, and advances we make can be used for their conditions, including cancer. I put together the first conference to bring together the nation's smartest folks to try and find the gene underlying Duchenne muscular dystrophy back in 1983. I invited 25 people, and among those 25 people was one of the leaders in cancer research. I work with anybody and everybody, and we share the data. So as we go forward at this point in time, I want to tell you that, yeah, we got hit by COVID. We got hit by COVID. Now, I started as CEO just about a year ago. We won't go into the reasons, but we had to make some changes. Leadership had not done well. I mean, I'm not going to go through all that. But one of the things I told the folks is that COVID is no longer an excuse. Yeah, things got canceled. Yeah, things weren't going to do, et cetera. But we're smart. We were energetic. We have a mission. And our mission doesn't end because COVID cuts us from doing an event. We have to be smart and think about doing COVID-proof events. And guess what? Guess what? We ended 2021 at one of the strongest periods we've had in years. We are ahead of the game in terms of over the past 5 years, we have done better. Awesome. And for adding to the mission and increasing the amount of dollars we spend on mission in terms of percentage of dollars that we have, we're the highest in 12 years.
Wow.
So,
amazing.
And so one of the things I want to say is I want to thank all of the MDA staffers who have stuck with me over this past year, who are here today. I hope you all get a chance to meet them. These are wonderful people. They have worked with MDA for years. What's my job as CEO? Well, I want them to hear this because I want to speak to 1,100 people so they all hear my thing. I'm here to support you. I'm here to make sure you can do your job, and we are going to increase the numbers of folks working with the firefighters over this next year. That's my commitment to you.
Thank you so much, Doc. We appreciate it. We're looking forward to be right next to you in this fight, as we've been all along.
Thank you, sir.
God bless and thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. Wood. I'd just like to recognize our 11th District Vice President Emeritus, Buddy Moss, for whom the HRC is named after, who couldn't make it, but I know he's home watching. We want to say, we miss you, Buddy. Hope to see you soon. All right? So listen, we've got some great sessions set up. The next couple of days are going to be action-packed. Engage. Ask the question. Listen, learn. Run full speed ahead. Learn from each other. We'll all be better off for it. I'd also like to take a minute to just thank our sponsors. Without them, we couldn't pull this off. In particular, your own IAFF Financial Corporation, the signature sponsor of this event, and the Firefighters First Credit Union, and their gold sponsorship. I'd also like to thank our great partners at Nationwide, NTA Life, MetLife, Security Benefit, and Cross Country Mortgage. Please take the time to visit their booths as you go by the sponsorship. We appreciate them all. Before we go to lunch, you all know this is Firefighter Cancer Awareness Month. And we're working each and every day alongside the Firefighter Cancer Support Network to raise awareness, increase support, and make sure our members get the treatment and screenings they need. Remember, you know your body better than anybody. And if it's not right, it's wrong, get checked. We can't take cancer on until you say it. Let's move the needle in firefighter cancer. Please rise and take a moment. Remember all of our brothers and sisters who have lost to the dreaded disease of cancer. Please stand. All right, let's extinguish cancer. Have a great week. Leave it better than you found it. Thanks, everybody.